Hi everyone, this is Culture Mapping and your hosts, Konstantin, that's obviously me, and Anastasia.
Hi, in this podcast inspired by the book Culture Map, we are interviewing people from various backgrounds to learn more about their culture and their life, and their businesses.
Talking about businesses, Anastasia and I were both entrepreneurs. I am a co-founder of content production company Storm, and Anastasia is a co-founder of Movingo, relocation platform. And Culture Mapping is our own way to reflect on how to live a global life in such a fragmented world.
Hey, I'm recording this from Paris. As you can see, my cultural trip is continuing around Europe. In this episode, you will not hear my voice as Anastasia took over and recorded an amazing interview dedicated to Cypriot culture and moreover, dedicated to architecture and how it reflects our views on life. Before jumping into the conversation with astonishing George Katodrytis, I would remind you about our sponsor. Coming up on August 28th, we will be honoring in the UAE Emirati Women's Day, a day dedicated to recognizing the remarkable achievements of women in the UAE. Show your appreciation by sending thoughtful gifts to the inspiring women in your life through FlowerWow's marketplace. With FlowerWow's user-friendly app, you can easily keep track of important dates with a built-in calendar that sends you reminders for birthdays and special events. Plus, you don't need to know the recipient's exact address. Just their name and phone number will do, and FlowerWow will take care of the rest, sending an SMS to confirm delivery details on the day. Join us in celebrating the incredible contributions of women everywhere. FlowerWow already operates in more than 30 countries around the world, and if you haven't used it yet, it's time to give it a try with our promo code CULTURE. It's CULTURE. It will avail 15% discount on any order and is valid until December 2024. And now, tuning in to the interview. Take care.
Hi, George. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hello. Thank you for the invitation. Great to be here.
Great to have you. So usually the first question we ask to our guests is, can you please just introduce yourself, how you usually do, who are you? What do you do? Where are you from?
Thank you. Yeah, my name is George Katodrytis. I have been here in Dubai since 2001. I came here only for a few years. I'm an architect. I'm also a professor of architecture. That was the main reason I came here. I started then and still now teach at the American University of Sharjah in the Department of Architecture. Originally, I come from Cyprus and the UK. I lived previous to coming here to these two countries. And now I'm here. I came here only for a few years. And somehow 23 years later, I'm still here and feeling as young as I was then.
Why did you choose to move here?
Yeah, so I lived in England for many years. I practiced there. I also practiced in Paris and London. Practiced also in Cyprus as an architect. And then I started an academic career in London in various schools of architecture. And then this opportunity came here to teach at the American University of Sharjah. And I was very curious then. I had to look on the map where Sharjah is and what Sharjah was at the time. The school and the university was just been created by His Highness Sheikh Sultan of Sharjah. The idea of the new school, the new place, an emerging country in the Middle East, it was somehow challenging for me. Having lived in Europe for a while, I thought, that's enough. I wanted just to almost start something new. And out of curiosity, I found myself here to test the ground. And as I said, I'm still here and I have no intention of going anywhere else for now.
You said you teach architecture, so any specific kind, and maybe you can comment a little bit on the architecture of Dubai in particular, because it gets a lot of criticism.
Yes. And when you say an architect, you're an architect working in the UAE or Dubai specifically. The first question is, it's great. It's like a paradise for architects. Everybody wants to come here and do these high-rise projects and so on. And to some extent, that is true. That is the perception. But in my case, that wasn't the reason I come here. I think from my point of view, I feel there's something more to contribute, not get involved with the kind of consumer production of architecture here, but have a little bit more ethical, critical, more creative approach, which is what I started doing. And I think I still feel it's an area that a lot of people who have come to Dubai or plan to come here, there should be also another challenge, a little personal challenge, ethical and so on, to be here. Having said that, I think coming into a place where it's booming through construction and master plans and real estate developments and so on, I think it's always great to be a designer, whether you participate as a creator and as a developer, or also as an educator and to some extent having a critical point of view, which is what I have been doing. So in any school of architecture, you have to educate students how to make buildings, to how to think as architects and so on, technically, conceptually, graphically as well. But also, they need to also have a level of responsibility and critical position as well. It's not about producing, but it's about, I think, contributing to society and culture as a whole. And in a way, over the last 25 years, I think the UAE has proven to be an amazing place of both production, but also level of awareness and vision and kind of questioning where we're going. And I think we have to be quite critical in a very positive way, of course. I'm in favor of the incredible momentum that the cities in the Gulf and the UAE specifically have gained in terms of development. And it's not just to make buildings, but it's about creating spaces for people. It's about the street. It's about sustainability. It's about quality of life. It's about interactivity. There's a whole interesting research body of work that has to do not so much about the building, but what happens after the building is done and how do we construct cities. The word livable is used a lot currently, and I think rightly so. How do we create spaces that make people happy, basically, and they enjoy being there beyond the formal language and the representations and the other techniques that we do have as architects.
You're from Cyprus. Can I say that you have a little bit of a European mindset, if we generalize a bit? From your point of view, from the person who was not born in the Middle East, or wasn't raised in the Middle East, what is livable environment for you, and does it exist in Dubai?
I mean, it's interesting, the condition of the city, let's say, in the UAE. And maybe it's not typical of the rest of the Middle East, but the high level of tolerance, the multiplicity of ethnicities, the interactivity, both at the social, political, but also religious and gender level, I think is unique to some extent. It's not homogeneous, and yet there's an incredible respect and balance among everyone. And then on top of that, you have the regional, geographic, environmental, climatic condition, which adds another challenge, I think. The openness of the light and the openness of space is incredible. The price we pay, of course, is the hot weather and so on. And therefore, it poses some fascinating questions. How do you project the future? What is the vision of the future? How you make cities so enjoyable to live, given the challenges of the multiplicity, I think, of individuals, that it's hardly to find within a group of people a lot of similarities. Everyone has different ideas and everyone have their own version of how we should live here. The environmental condition as well, which is a challenge. I see this as a way to refine and define our architecture here, which is not Western, or it shouldn't be Western. It should be modernized. It should have a respect of the origin of this place, let's call it tradition and the culture and so on. We should not copy it, but we should find ways, as I think the early settlers and the fathers of the UAE had a vision to modernize the cities around the Gulf, using some Western models, but also a vision and a passion and a challenge how to serve their people by moving forward. I call it an absolute modernization. And I think the region has a lot to offer in terms of young talent, in terms of resources. We do some great research at the American University of Sharjah about indigenous and local materials that can be used in construction, for example. We're looking at ways to challenge the cooling down of buildings during especially the summer period, and how we can use passive maybe energy and other ways to achieve that. So the city is not defined here, which I think is great. There's always the vision and the optimism for the future, which I think is great. Things are done very carefully and very critically, which I think also works very well. And it creates this kind of culture, not only for architects and designers, but especially for young people. It's this culture of optimism, I think, how to define a new level of kind of globalization, which is kind of focused geographically, let's say, in this part of the world.
That's very deep about the globalization. That is it good or not? Because when we were in the elevator with you just now, we were discussing the work of an artist, Italian artist Filippo Minelli, whom we also interviewed here in this podcast a couple of episodes before. His latest exhibition here in Dubai was kind of a little bit against globalization, because it's kind of making all the things, let's say, more or less the same. And it doesn't matter if it is UAE, Italy, US, or Brazil, or any other country in the world. Like, you get something that looks exactly the same. Do you feel it here? And what are maybe the places or the elements of traditions where to look for them here in Dubai, for example?
Yes. I mean, the work of Filippo is great. I think it's quite critical of what's happening here, as I was just telling you earlier on. But also, I think he's kind of celebrating what's going on. And this double-edged or a little bit more ambiguous condition, I think, works well. So you are critical, but not to a point where it stops you from doing things. And when it comes to globalization, I think the UAE and the Gulf City, as I call it in general, have grown over the last 20, 25 years through the overall, I think, momentum of globalization, that you do the same buildings, you eat the same food, you all go to the same holidays, and you copy everybody else's cultures somehow. And I think that's inevitable to some extent, given that identity and authenticity are a little bit difficult to achieve if you haven't developed that over years. So if you go to an old city center of a European city, you're there, and there's a kind of centuries of traditions, and you see the cathedral and the buildings and the market and so on. Maybe some of them are fake to some extent, but you accept it and you take a selfie and so on. Here, you don't have that, and to that extent, and there's a lot of attempts to copy it, which I am quite critical, to reinvent or reenact history, or make buildings that look old and make souks that look old, but in fact they're like shopping malls and so on. So I think it's inevitable that we are engaged into a kind of globalization, that at least there's a common language that we all understand, and I think that's important just as a starting point. And maybe what is important also for the future is to identify some of the local traditions, whether it's a way of living, customs, respect to traditions and religion, for example, and history, and find ways to make them relevant and contemporary and modern to some extent. And in a way, the UAE city has managed to balance the respect to tradition and allowing to continue without reinventing it so much, but also allowing tourists and kind of the global citizens and global Bedouins, if you like, to come here and be able to feel at home to some extent. And I think that feeling of feeling home without belonging to a place is quite important. The other day, I was telling my wife, every time we arrive to the airport back to the UAE, it's like we come home. And that happened to me 23 years ago. And I'm not quite sure what that is, but somehow it's the openness and the welcoming character of the city here. Maybe a sense of safety, comfort, and assurance at all level, at the personal and the kind of social level. It's something that not a lot of cities offer. I mean, if you travel to a big city in Europe, in the US, or in Asia, and you arrive to a place, In my case, I don't feel very, very safe. I need a few days just to acclimatize and know where to go. But somehow here in other Gulf cities, there's a sense of welcoming and feeling at home. Not home in the traditional sense, but somehow it's the culture and the condition is such here that you can anchor or get attached or find ways to do your own interests and your own things without disturbing other people. And the society here, or at least the what I call the urban condition, has capacity and a room for everyone to do so, as long as the thresholds are not stepped over and so on. And I find that really interesting, this kind of unspoken culture here that it doesn't take very long to understand. And once you log in, you become more creative, I think, and you feel as though there's so many things you can discover and do. And I think it's kind of this abstract way of looking at the city here. For me, at least, it's a fascinating quality.
Yeah, and when you say these things about the UAE, I can feel a lot of love, a lot of admiration. However, when we go online, we can find like a lot of people who would say, okay, UAE, I would never go there. Like everything is so plastic, nothing is real, everything is so bad. Like many comments. And you were also mentioning that you, together with your students, you work on this concepts of the livable places. And my question is, can you name, let's say, 3 places in the UAE which are worth being into, or that you can call this lovely word livable?
Yes. I mean, just to respond to your early comment, I think a lot of people from the West, maybe Western media, I think now they're more kind of positive. They have appreciated more what has been achieved here. But let's say in the early years of maybe 20, 25, 30 years ago, they were very critical in terms of the apparent, according to them, waste of energy, resources, not being fully aware of sustainability and so on. And now it's not happening that anymore. And why do we build all these high rises, and why do we have air condition?
Because we would die without.
Yeah, because in Europe, they also, as a matter of fact, they still have high rises and they have heating as well, so, but I think that criticism from the environmental point of view is not done as much, or at least there's more evidence to prove that some of the cities here are quite sustainable and so on, and livable as well. I guess livable cities, one has the image of pedestrian streets and nice markets and people on bicycles and so on, which is true. And I think the UAE is trying to achieve that, like the small scale of the street. 25 years ago, there were big master plans and so on. Always developments that you see from satellite pictures. Now, if you notice, there are not so many aerial perspectives in the new developments. They're kind of eye-level perspectives. It's all about green and people walking as opposed to driving. A lot of landscape and kind of small scale. And much, I guess, the density of architecture, it's much smaller. Buildings are closer together. It's more shading. There's more interactivity and so on. I think it's a good evolution that we move from the mega scale to the human scale. Having said that, I still feel myself, and I might sound a little bit old-fashioned here, but when I first came here, I walked in the old part of Sharjah in the middle of summer, and the old part of Dubai, like downtown, the bazaars in the night and the chaos of the night, and the neon lights and all these nationalities and noise. And there was something fascinating about that. And for me, that is still the livable cities, the urban high-density center that is not really comfortable and maybe is not so much welcoming for families and so on. But it's all about production, and it's all about workers, and it's about people moving things, the hamals who pull things in the streets, and the shops that spill out their goods in the streets, and the kind of the plastic neon light signage and so on. And there was something, it kind of reminded me some scenes from the Blade Runner film, which is one of my favorite films, which is always night, it's dense, it's humid and it's crowded, and you leave your place, you get a feeling you never go back again. It's kind of Tokyo, cyberpunk Tokyo of the 80s in a way. At least that's
and this is our everyday life.
yeah. And this kind of this cinematic street scene, it was unique and is kind of dangerous, if you like. It's all about an action, moving, and exploration in the city. And I think that there's parts in Abu Dhabi and Sharjah in Dubai, obviously, they're kind of where there are more layers of things. They're old and new, and traditional souks and modern plastic, let's say, artifacts on sale, and so. And these are the moments, I think, that the city becomes very livable. I think it's because it's all about production and economy, and it's about selling and buying and negotiating and bargaining. And I find that more interesting than the well-manicured, gated suburbia somehow. It's kind of comfortable, of course, and we all love to live there, mainly expatriates and locals as well. But somehow it has very little to do with a Middle East city. And maybe if we find ways to overlap the two, to make high level density in terms of markets and productions, factories, for example, if I may dare say so, but also bring landscaping and the whole idea of kind of suburbia. And I think a lot of the new developments now in the Gulf have that level of mixed use, and even whether it's a beach resort or it's a desert development, there's always a hybrid condition. There's more than just one thing, and maybe that is and the intensity and the layering, I think, of these different activities and kind of narratives, as we call them, could be quite interesting.
So what are the good livable places that currently exist here?
Yes, and I haven't answered that question yet.
Yeah, I'm waiting because I'm very curious.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, one is the downtowns. I think there's also these clusters of developments, either intentionally or unintentionally, they have developed really well. One, I would say, is places such as Al Serkal in Dubai and the Dubai Design District. I mean, they use the kind of the designer's narrative or slogan as one way to get the intensity and interactivity and young people in, which I think is cool. That's how, the Docklands and Village in New York started as painters and designers, and then everybody moved in to some extent. And again, has to do with this hybridization of doing more than one thing. So I would say Al Serkal, the Dubai Design District, maybe City Walk in Dubai as well, that I'm familiar with. And I think those are the places which they're kind of anchored and they attract a specific lifestyle that is used as a catalyst for other things to happen.
Very, very interesting to hear architects' perspective on Dubai and on the UAE in general. But let's now talk a little bit more about you as a human. What were the reasons for you to leave Cyprus?
I mean, I left Cyprus and then I went to the UK before I returned back to Cyprus. I think professionally, as far as I'm concerned, I was and I still am very ambitious. And sometimes when the place is too small or it's too much saturated, I feel a little bit claustrophobic and I want to...
Yeah, on an island.
Especially on an island. But also culturally, when things are very close, I'm really challenged by exploring and testing and experimenting with new possibilities. And somehow the UAE, I found the UAE on the map somehow, and I came here not knowing exactly what I was going to find, but I really found exactly what I was looking. This level of professional setups, things are possible, everything is possible. One requires to be quite professional, I think, and is very demanding and work very hard, which I love that as a workaholic. And somehow I found this balance between my own personal life and my professional life here. I always call the US, it's like being on holidays, but you work really hard every day somehow. And I enjoy this polarized condition of the two extremes somehow. And when things work well here, when, right people, right clients, right initiatives find a response, I think you can do amazing things. As I think the the whole country has proven to do and has achieved all these years.
You said you were a workaholic, but you're from Cyprus, and I have many friends living on Cyprus. And what they tell me about people from Cyprus is absolutely the opposite. That's like, it's this typical southern mentality when everything is a given. You have blue sky, you have beautiful sea, you have food growing on the streets, and you are not particularly wired to work actually. How did it happen that you became a workaholic?
Yes, I know, and I can be also critical and say, the large parts of South Europe have this kind of bit of laid-back kind of attitude, which I think is good because it makes people relax and so on. But at the same time, it's not productive, obviously. Things are not moving on. So I feel I'm not the typical Cypriot. Although I lived in England for many years, and maybe I have a little bit of that mentality, to a little bit more of efficiency, maybe trying to find a significance or understand things a little bit more. Also, my wife, who comes from South Korea, teases me that I'm the only Cypriot. I'm always on time, and I finish things on time. And I compare, I have to be careful when I'm saying this, but I always compare the Greeks and the South Koreans and how the different cultures have developed over the years and so on, without having a right or wrong. But I think a level of efficiency and productivity, I think is quite useful. Maybe not all of us should do that, but I think some of us should do it.
And what is a typical Cypriot you've mentioned?
I think things have changed since I think Cyprus joined the European Union, and a lot of young Cypriots also travel abroad. They study abroad. A lot of them may live abroad and so on. So there's slightly different mentality of becoming more productive, I guess is the word, or efficient. But having said that, there's also another part which is always interesting to be relaxed, and it's almost like Habibi, don't worry, you can do it later, and have a little siesta and do things later and so on, postpone things and so on. And I don't want to be critical or political about these things. I'm saying this with a sense of humor, obviously, but I think all places are changing, because there's also a global competition about economy and the wellness and welfare and so on. I think the whole world now, we're in a state of moving on and be more efficient, I think, and productive.
Cyprus is also known as a very tax-friendly place. That's why I know that many people would go and set up a business there. Do Cypriots consider it like a good place to start a business? Is there like some kind of entrepreneurship vibe in the air that people want to start their own things?
I think they always try since the 1960s when Cyprus became independent. It's almost like the UAE in the 70s. It's a new place where you can, they said, some tax-free at times, different times, or incentives to invest and so on. Offer golden visas and property investment and other opportunities. It's always been a place like that. But I think the place is a little bit too small to be able to capture, a critical mass of this investment. So it does happen, but not to a great extent where one can see a significant impact.
What I meant to ask is like the entrepreneurship as, let's say, a mindset or a thing to do. Is it kind of promoted in families? Do people think it's a good thing to do? Because also maybe they see people coming on Cyprus with various business initiatives.
I think so. There's an entrepreneurial spirit among especially young people to set up business, to take initiatives, to create something new, or at least introduce a new way of thinking, whether it's establishing a business based on technology or economy, finance, infrastructure, and so on. There is always that feeling, and there are great opportunities because also it's a place like a Mediterranean island that can combine the kind of the holiday beach resort with a business and some form of social and political freedom as well. So I think that is also, it's an ideal place to be. I think it could have done it much better, I have to say. There's also the problem of the political problem in Cyprus between the Greeks and the Turks that is kind of always preventing a natural way of developing the economy properly.
So you also mentioned that your wife is from South Korea. How did you two meet?
We're trying to create a Cyprus South Korean society or club in the UAE. There might be one or two other couples. I don't know. We haven't met any other couple with this. So it's quite an unusual combination. We did meet here, actually, which is interesting. Two travelers of global nomadic culture meeting in Dubai. And all of a sudden, I think obviously things work out really well, and we got married, and we spent I think we split our time between Cyprus and South Korea when we mainly travel to see families and so on. So I think it's maybe the apparent lack of I wouldn't say compatibility, but matching. As they say, opposites always attract each other, and so I think it worked really, really well.
So you refer to you two as opposites. Why so?
Yes, I think so. Obviously, because we come from completely different backgrounds, geographically more than anything else. But of course, when it comes to personalities and persons and ways of thinking, there's always similarities. Not necessary, of course, but there are always ways to communicate. And I think there's something interesting. I can't make a theory out of this, but couples that come from different parts of the world, I think for me, there's something fascinating. We don't think in terms of national terms. We don't think in terms of political. We only think in terms of human terms and challenging or completing, augmenting each other also. Maybe that is the new global condition that you asked me earlier on.
Yeah, but that's also beautiful, because I think almost all the guests in our podcast so far, they are in some kind of international relationship, and they always say something different about this. Like someone says, yeah, there were a lot of cultural clashes and this was hard, but we found a way. And someone says like, no, there can't be cultural clashes because there are feelings, and when there are strong feelings, like everything else doesn't matter. Were there any cultural clashes for you, like in between you two, or maybe with the families, that was shocking?
Not so much. I mean, her family and the relatives, they still call me a foreigner, but I think my interpretation of foreigner is a little bit negative after I lived in Europe. For them, a foreigner is somebody who just happens to come from another country. So there's some positive reading about that. I don't think there's anything negative about this kind of hybridization, if you like, of almost like an alchemy of putting dissimilar elements together. There's always a new energy that comes out. But as you said, a lot of people in your program that you have interviewed, they're involved with partners of different countries. And maybe coming back to the UAE, I mean, we're all expatriates. We're all foreigners here. But there's also a tolerance and an acceptance and a respect, which is unique, I think. And that, I think, facilitates this global interaction and communication and understanding, especially of people, especially this time where global politics and social, religious, and especially political conditions are so intense in the region and across the world. Sense of nationalism and belonging are so strong and controversial, unfortunately, nowadays. And I think you need to come here to relax a little bit and realize what these United Nations really means. You don't have to debate it in New York. You have to come here and live. And I think there's something powerful about tolerance and about people of different religions and backgrounds coming in and respecting each other. Because once you respect each other, then you begin to understand more. You become more productive, as opposed to debate your difference and your right to a country or your right to dominate against, somebody who may visit your country and so on.
Tell me about some qualities or things that you kind of learned from your wife that you would never have if you would just be living on Cyprus the whole life.
I mean, the first thing is I got used to very spicy food. I think I'm just thinking now in terms of the kind of societies in general, there's certain modesty and respect about the South Korean society, which I got to understand. They're all the same. I mean, you enter the metro and even an elevator and everybody's so quiet. I mean, it's almost like even if they talk, they whisper because they respect the person who they don't know standing next door to them. And I like this kind of complete wholeness of respect and modesty of the society, which I think we lack in the Middle East. Having said that, it's good to be a little bit lively, to a little bit more gestural and expressive. But I think that's one thing that I appreciate. And also the way collectively things are done. So the way, for example, just a little detail now, they organize their trash every week. It's just incredible in Korea. You know, you have to go down from your building and I'm sure now it's done in other parts of the world, but that was 5-6 years ago when I noticed that. And every type of trash has a box and everybody puts it in, and even organic food and so on have a place. And you go there on a specific night because that evening the municipal trash collection will happen, and you see everybody doing it. It's almost like, and they feel happy that they're doing it. And I was doing it at 2:00 in the morning in minus 10 degrees centigrade. And little things like that, and you realize, wow, I mean, this is incredible that everybody's doing it. And if you don't do it, you don't feel part of that collective feeling. There's something strong, I think, to be said about being, I guess, ethically or responsibly involved in this collective things that is for the benefit of everything. Because if everybody benefits, it will reflect back to you again. So I kind of enjoy this collectiveness and modesty, which very few cultures, I think, have. And you can see how the kind of South Koreans have managed to develop all this throughout the years. I think it's because they always work together. It either happens or it doesn't happen. It's not something you create. It's just, I think, cultural thing, and in terms of the way the country developed. And they came out of civil wars in the 50s and so on. They managed to achieve this collectiveness. And then individuality now becomes something unique. At the same time, they are individuals when you get to see them and understand them a little bit more.
That's beautiful what you said, and I think it's really very important, and you don't see it in many societies these days because everyone is like very individualist, and even if you, I don't know, go read whatever is kind of on hype online, everything is like, okay, think of yourself, do what's the best for you. Everyone is so self-conscious, but we almost don't talk about like how do we coexist in the society altogether.
Exactly.
And I think it's also fascinating that you work a lot with young people, well, your students. What are the ideas they want to kind of express, to project? What do they offer in their projects? I got this question because just yesterday before meeting you, I was rewatching your lecture from In Loco Talks, and you were showing a lot of very like futuristic things, but in general, like you work with all those young people from various backgrounds, different ideas. What do they want this world to be?
I think maybe this applies to all, it should apply to all schools of architecture or all universities. I can focus more on architecture. About, you take these young kids from high school, sometimes at the age of 16, that they haven't left their family to live alone. They never travel alone or even travel in that sense. And then they arrive first day at the university to study architecture for the next 5 years, which is a very hard course, but it's very rewarding at the same time. I mean, they need to work hard and so on. And it's very complex because you have to think in terms of ideas. You have to think technically, scientifically, for example, how you make things, how things stand up. You have to work as an artist. You have to be able to aesthetically construct things that have a certain appearance, which is great, which is also very difficult to teach. So we take these young kids from the region, and then through a series of 5 years, we make them professionals. It's incredible to see the journey from our point of view. The day after they graduate, they can join the rest of the world and do these high rises and be involved in discussions and contribute to the making of the city and so on. And I think it's fascinating also for me. And that's partly, I think, some of my ideas have kept kind of alive. And always I'm challenged by new ideas because I work with young people and I always even question my own ideas. You never finish, you never arrive at a conclusion, because by the time you do something in the studio as a student or also as a teacher, somebody else next door does something better. And all of a sudden there's this incredible challenge of new ideas and how to do things. And there's always this optimism for the future as well, which is what I said earlier on about the country. There's so much more you can invent and do and have a vision of this future condition and so on. So I think it's fascinating to work with this young generation. On one hand, as I call it, I don't train my students, I only educate them. I only challenge them to think in their own terms, critically and creatively. I don't tell them how to do things. I challenge them how they might begin to think and some of the techniques. And after that, it's up to them. In some of my students, exactly that. It's like an open field of experimentation. Not always works very well, but, sometimes when things don't work well, it's also great because you learn how not to do things sometimes. You unlearn, as we call it. And I think this, the freshness of kind of teaching young people reflects to me, kind of goes back to them as well. And then it's the most amazing feeling, I think, to see these young generations graduating and coming back, challenging yourself and everyone else, and do these amazing things that some of our graduates, so many examples that I can mention, that they're engaged at the global level, let's say amazing graduate programs in Europe, in the US, but also coming back here and doing some amazing buildings.
And if you could design any building and build it, and the budget is not an issue, and the location can be anything, what would it be?
I mean, at the end of the day, for me, there's this spatial condition. When something it's an amazing building, and that's because the space is great. You cannot escape that. So for me, the experience, the spatial, or I should say experiential condition of a building, it's so unique and so difficult to achieve. I mean, all buildings create some experience, but very few achieve this amazing. Like when you visit a building somewhere and you describe it to somebody, I went to the Pantheon in Rome, this amazing dome. I mean, the Pantheon is more than 2,000 years old, and it's an amazing dome. And that is one example. It's about space, about experience. I think still that requirement and that condition is still valid. That's also how we try to operate in the city here in the UAE, that we need to achieve this quality as opposed to fake it or escape it or do something simplistic and get away with it. So for me, still that is the kind of the sequence of the experience of a building and the composition, and it's the beauty. And not a lot of buildings achieve that, but there are a number of buildings, I think, in the UAE that achieve that, especially some of the modernist buildings. I would also mention the World Trade Center, 1970.
Yeah, that's my favorite one.
Yes, exactly. 1978, the first building in the desert outside the old part of Dubai at the time. His Highness Sheikh Rashid appointed a British architect, John Harris, to design that. It was such a daring thing at the beginning of what is now Sheikh Zayed Road. And maybe as an object it's interesting because it's an office building and there's not so much of an experience inside. But that is one interesting moment, I think, of achieving that. And there are maybe a series of other examples that one is able to mention as well.
So you would go for like a cathedral or some kind of a dome structure if you would do something yourself?
It doesn't have to be a literal dome.
But it needs to give this kind of feeling. This is what you meant.
this level of the kind of wholeness of the interior. It doesn't have to be a dome which has historic connotations. It could be a different depth of space or to do with lighting and layers and materiality and activities and interactions. But usually you find this in public buildings where there is in Europe, a railway station or maybe a cathedral, an auditorium and so on. There's kind of something unique about this level of collective participation in buildings.
Also, all these buildings, in my opinion, they have one thing in common, at least for me personally. It's kind of this feeling of opportunity, like because railway stations or auditoriums and so on, it's something about, I don't know, new beginnings and start of something new.
That's right. Either you arrive or you leave or you watch performance. And so there's always the beginning or the end of
something significant. Yeah. So there is usually one final question I ask all our guests. Even though you've left Cyprus long ago and you're like traveled a lot and you're very happy here in the UAE, please name me one quality of a Cypriot you're kind of very proud of and you wish every person would have it.
Oh my God, that's a difficult question because I haven't lived in Cyprus for so many years. I'll tell you, because the other day I was talking with a philosopher professor, and we're talking about Stoicism, which means like a thinker. And there's an ancient Greek philosopher by the name of Zenon of Kideos, who is the father of Stoicism, yeah, which is like a big field of Greek and contemporary philosophy. And then I discovered that he was born in my hometown in Larnaca, actually not very far away where I was born. There's a statue of Zenon the Kideos there. And only discovered this recently, and I felt very proud because he comes from my small town in Larnaca in Cyprus. And somehow I felt very good that I was born close to where he lived as well.
So, and what's the quality?
And because he was involved in this philosophical field of the deep thinking and in philosophy and analyzing the common sense also, it's all about common sense. I would dare declare him as my local hero.
That's amazing. That's a beautiful way to end our conversation. Thank you very much. It was my pleasure, and I hope you enjoyed your time here as well.
I enjoyed very much. Thank you for your challenging and so well-informed questions, and it was a great time to talk with you.
Thank you so much.
And a quick reminder, this season is sponsored by FlowerWow, a marketplace where you can find the right gift for your loved ones. Download the app through the link in the description. Use the promo code CULTURE, it's CULTURE, to get a 15% discount on anything you want. This discount works until December 2024. By supporting our sponsors, you support us. Thank you so much. We will hear each other quite soon.